$14,000 trading only GBPUSD this week. I'm going to show you every trade that I took in detail so you can see exactly why I entered, exactly where I entered, and what my profit was for each trade. So let's get started. This is GBPUSD on the weekly time frame, and you can see that we've had a big break of structure to the downside here. So that big bearish break of structure indicating that weekly is bearish. If you zoom out as well, you can see that over time we have been stepping down, making lower lows and lower highs as well. Lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. So our external structure is bearish as well as our internal structure. Perfect. On the daily time frame here, you can see that although the weekly is bearish, we are stepping up internally. So we have several breaks of structures to the upside, one here, and one here. You could even call this a very small break of structure as well as this one really on the daily time frame to indicate that price is making a retracement within that weekly range. This is the 4-hour time frame. You can see that price is stepping up, making higher highs and higher lows. Really, really aggressive price action, but it's very easy to see which way the direction is, at least on the 4-hour. Once you step it down, you can see we've got smaller ranges, of course. As price comes up really high up in this range, you can now see that we are starting to slow down in price. However, we've got to keep in mind that 4 hours bullish, right? Before we even step down into the hourly time frame, we have to consider that we're very, very bullish, at least on the 4-hour and the daily time frame, to give a bigger retracement on that weekly. As we go down to the hourly time frame here, you can see that we have several breaks to the upside, one here, one here. The thing is, we actually had a bearish break of structure here, but keep in mind, when we have an external structure that's bullish and we see very minor breaks like this, a lot of the time it could be a sweep of liquidity. So if you look here, you actually have a pool of liquidity sitting there, right? So you have a pool of liquidity that's just sitting there. Price then sweeps that and then does a big push to the upside. So what does price do next? It makes a big push to the upside. Now that big push to the upside is going to entice a lot of buyers in. However, because of this bearish break, a lot of people will be selling from this high. What are they expecting? Well, they're expecting a lower low there, right? Following structure, right? It makes sense, but we always have to keep that external bias, or really what the intention of the market is, top of our minds. So you can see that after this break of structure, we have a really deep retracement, did not make a higher high. I think a lot of traders will be thinking sells at this point in time. Again, external structure always is going to be king here. We have an internal break here, an internal break here. Perfect. So price is stepping down bearish. Again, always got to keep what the real bias is at the top of our heads, right? So you can see that after this big push to the downside, we have several 15-minute breaks. Price is coming to the bottom of the Asia range at the end of the Asia session. We end Asia and price has a big push up. So that big push up again, if people were thinking sells from here, that's great, right? A lot of people will be looking for sells there. It's not wrong. It's definitely not wrong. However, I'm always keeping what the real intention of the market is top of my head, right? Now you can see that we have this big push up at the start of, at the end of Asia session, right? So now I think a lot of people are going to be thinking that price is going to go higher, at least into this area where they can look for a sell, right? Again, not a wrong thing to do, but consider where the liquidity is. Now consider also that because of that big push that didn't create a higher high, what I see is a big pool of liquidity just sitting here. So we not only have the Asia highs created equal highs, but we also have a big pool of liquidity that's sitting right above that. So logical to expect, if I can get into a buy, that price will want to hunt for that liquidity. It's a logical target. Take out the Asia highs and then take out this high here. Perfect. Take every trader out, and then we can continue with our bias, where our trade is over by then. So back on the 15-minute, you can see we had that little push to the upside. Perfect. We are a little bit before London session. I won't enter before London, but what's really interesting is you can see that price has a big push up, and then this is kind of an hour before London session, right? So a lot of people will be looking for early buys there, whether it be a buy to sell, whether it just be a buy based on this little 15-minute break to the upside. There's your first sign of people looking for buys. However, when we go down to the 30-minute, we can see that, yes, we've taken out those Asia lows now, which is great. We can now look for buys. Now we've got this big area of interest where there's institutions in drawdown, and also because of structure, a lot of people will think that price will need to take this low out, which is actually going to set up buys for us just perfectly, and you'll see it in a second. But as we go down to the lower timeframes here, you can see this is the 5-minute. I can refine this POI for sure, but I'm just going to go skip forward to the start of London. All right, cool. So price comes all the way down into that last point of interest that we were just speaking about in that range. We of course have the bias that price will want to take out these external highs, these 4-hour highs, because we have the liquidity that's just sitting there, right? It's just resting liquidity that is just begging to be taken out. We can also then start to draw something like this across, right? Which is going to be our first trend line, because we know that trend line is liquidity, especially third touch. You can see one touch, two touch, potential third touch, wherever that might be, is going to be an extra confluence that price will want to rocket, right? So now as we go a little bit further down, we can see that we start London session by coming in and doing a small breaker structure, more or less just creating equal highs as of now. You'll see in a second why I looked for a sell. So now if we go down to the 1 minute time frame, so what we could see here was I actually drew a little trend line like this on, right? Because I was looking at a potential buy from this area. And again, it did have a nice push to the upside. There was a beautiful area here. If you did enter that, you would have just been stopped out. Again, a few minutes before London, I'm very strict on not entering before London open. So I wouldn't have taken that trade anyway. But as you can see, price had a big push to the upside, comes into and creates these equal highs. So from there, I was really quite interested in looking at the 15-second price action. Now on the 15-second here, you can see that we have these equal highs across there. We've already taken out trendline liquidity, and I was seeing that this was creating a pool of liquidity down here too, which is begging to be taken out, right? Pool liquidity. I was thinking my idea for today was, all right, cool. Well, if I'm going to look for a buy, which I want to do, first I want to see this liquidity taken out, because I think this area is just too easy. As you can see, this institutional area just looks too easy to me. I don't really feel confident looking for a buy there, even though we're about to get a breaker structure, which I will show you there. As you can see, we got the breaker structure. So what we can see now is that we created equal highs, internal little 15-second equal highs actually, right below this liquidity area. So we had those equal highs created. We then had a sweep of those equal highs. And then this is even better because we created this little tiny equal highs again, internal equal highs. Then price comes in, does one more sweep, just really letting us know that it's really taken out so much liquidity and it's ready to at least give us a retracement. This is where I entered by market. So where you got this line was where I entered. Now, what I also noticed was that we had this little minor trend line building up again, which is an extra confluence for me getting into a trade. I did give it a little bit on the stop loss just in case it did want to do one more sweep up, although I could have been a little bit tighter here and gotten a 1 to 6 out of this trade, but that's completely fine. No worries. Price then came in, reacted, broke through that trend line, perfect. By the time we made this low, I was feeling pretty confident that we're going to start our retracement. And again, I saw this as such an obvious area that people will be looking for buys that I wanted to see that taken out before I looked for a sell. And that's why my initial target for this sell was actually to take out not only this point of interest, but this liquidity itself it was a 1 to 3.86. At that point, I ended up closing 60% of my trade because it was a sell to buy opportunity, right? Now you can see price moving. I almost got taken out at break even here, which was really interesting, but price just kept moving along. And then it just started reacting from that point of interest. And then, yeah, there it is. So there we go. We make a lower low. Awesome. So from there, you can see that I already closed 60% of that sell. I was now looking for a buy. So I was not married to that sell. I was not thinking that I needed price to go lower. I was now in the mindset of, okay, cool. Sell's done. We've taken profit. How do we get into a buy now? Now we can see we're in that area as well. Still, a lot of people will want to see this taken out. We've got this trend line building up. Also got POIs throughout, which, you know, we already know that when price comes into a POI plus a trend line, it's a very dangerous place to look for a sell or a buy. As we go down to the lower timeframes again, this will be the 1 minute. We can see now that we had a big break of structure to the downside. So what that is going to be doing as well is you're going to have sellers now working with this bearish range. Again, not keeping the intention of what price really wants to do at top of mind is going to be very detrimental to your trading. On the 1 minute here, we had our breaker structure to the upside right there, going down to the 15-second. There's your bullish breaker structure. And it was really, really simple here. I noticed that we had so much liquidity taken out, so much liquidity. On top of that, I love working with trend lines. I had another trend line like this, which I knew was going to act as liquidity as well. And you can see we had this first internal break, mitigation, second break. This is where I set my limit. Could have been nice and tight with 1 pip less on the entry. However, I wanted to make sure I got into that trade. We can see that first entry there would have been golden, right? And that would have been, I just didn't feel too confident with that break being a sufficient break. So I wanted to see 1 more push, 2 pushes, and then enter on that trade. And that's what I did. So I could have got in a bit more better risk to reward, but that's completely fine. So then that limit was set. That limit was set at right here. You can see how I'm tagged in. Price ended up coming in, taking that trend line liquidity. Again, it went right down into this lower point of interest too. So that could have been a much better risk to reward trade. But to be honest, it's not about that. For me, it's just about getting in the trade, ensuring that I'm in. Once I'm in, I can manage my position. So now we'll step back into the 1 minute. It's no point looking at the 15-second now. And at this point already, you can see we had another internal break on the 1 minute, right? So at this point, I was already break even on the trade. And I was thinking, okay, cool. Well, now whatever happens, happens. Now, for me managing this, I had my final target at a 1 to 15 here at this at the highs we spoke about, right? Take out that Asia liquidity, come and take out that pool of liquidity that's sitting all the way across there. Perfect, cycle done. So what we were looking for was this high to be taken, and I was very confident in that. I know that we could have easily sold off there based on structure, but price action was telling a different story. It's about understanding the story of price and be a little bit more creative with what price really is actually showing you. So then we could see that this high was actually my target one. I wasn't even worried about, you could see it just smashes through it. Then it has that internal break. So now we're talking here. Of course, we could have drawn a trend line across like this too, which then made this area an area where you've got a POI plus a trend line. Danger, do not sell from that area. This is really, really good. So now we have this area of liquidity that we've got marked out. We have our internal break. For me, I'd already taken 50% off the table at this high, and I was just letting the rest play out. Now, the actual POI entry was a 2-pip stop, but on my MetaTrader, I entered the lot sizes as if it was a 4-pip stop. So I'm just gonna make my stop a little bit bigger now so you can see the realistic risk to reward on this trade. So I was going for a 1 to 8.6. I had taken this high at a 1 to 3. I closed 50%. And the rest of it, I was going to close at 1 to 8.6. As you can see, we have our targets in mind. We've still got trend line that's coming up. We've got POIs coming up as well. So we're looking for price to melt through that. Now it was just managing my trades. There's no point watching this anymore. We've already closed 50% on a 1 to 4 sell. And now we've closed 50% on a 1 to 3 buy. Price can do whatever it wants, so we just let it play out. Once it comes into that trend line, it smashes through it. No surprise there. And I actually was watching this and seeing it react from this area here. Now, I really had hopes that it was going to take out that Asia high, and it actually was reacting from here. I actually managed to close another 50% here. The first trade I secured 2.78K. And the second trade, I secured 5.78K. So as you can see, managed to secure more here. I was going to let the whole thing run to take out this high. It eventually did it, but it would have hit me at break even first. Remember I said I was break even once price already started to move on that 1 minute time frame. So I would have not taken that whole position. So it was very good trade management on my side to actually close there. Now I didn't want to close there. I really don't want to close partials at a POI with Asia highs right above. I see that as a massive area of liquidity. If it's London session, price will more than likely want to go take that out. It eventually did, but not before hitting me at break even first. So I was happy with that trade management. The rest hit break even. So the real RR, full RR potential was really like a 1 to 6 on this trade. Sell was a 1 to 3.8. Perfect. Let's go over to the next day and have a look. All right, so here we are on Wednesday, and we're going to see what the entry was for today. So back on the daily, we already know that we're making that retracement within that weekly range, but the daily is stepping up bullish. As we go down to the 4 hour, we can see again, this was that buy that we got into. It actually ended up doing about a 1 to 30 on that trade, but of course, I took my partials. I was happy with that trade. So then price had another massive push up. So we know that buys are still the higher time frame buys here and the more probable trade. So now go down to the hourly time frame. You can see that we've had an internal bullish break of structure right here. We also have a POI that's been left behind. So we have some internal structure from this low to this high, which is bullish. And so initially, I was wanting to see this Asia low taken out and then look for buys to take out the Asia high because that's in line with structure as well. We got this POI here, which I think a lot of people will be looking for a buy at. However, with the Asia liquidity sitting there, I'd rather wait for it to be taken out first and then look for a buy. As we go down to the 15-minute time frame here, you can see this is our hourly structure that we just marked out before. You can see that we have price more or less creating this trendline liquidity around that Asia low area. So now we're just waiting for that to get taken out. So once that liquidity has been taken and that POI has been taken, I did notice that we actually stepped into an area down here, which had a lot of imbalance too, right? So we could look for potentially a buy from there. As you can see, internally, we had a bearish breaker structure, which now you've got a lot of traders that are already thinking for a sell there. However, I'm noticing a massive area of liquidity in the form of equal highs. So I was really looking for that to get swept. If I could get into a buy, take out those equal highs, take out the Asia highs, and I would essentially be done for the day. So that was my idea. As we go down into the lower timeframes here, I'll step straight into the 1 minute time frame. What I also noticed was that we had a minor trend line. Now, keep in mind, I really like these minor trend lines. We also had a bigger trend line, which if you drew from here to here, which then, in my opinion, made this area a very good area to be potentially, once price comes into, just completely destroyed, rockets through that, and then goes for the highs. Perfect. That was my idea anyway. So I was trying to get into an early buy, but of course, I don't enter trades before London Open. So let's skip it through. We ended up breaking that high. Now, the unfortunate thing was this was a really clean entry. We had an internal breaker structure to the upside here. Now, for me, it was just before my trading hours, but you could enter something like this at this POI itself. 3.7 pip stop. You can see you'd already be floating at a 1 to 4, but really targeting that Asia high for a 1 to 10, right? Target that liquidity, looking to see this liquidity taken out as well. So that would have been a very good entry. For me, I saw that push up and I was just, maybe I was a little bit aggressive with my entry here, but you'll see anyway what I was looking at. So on the 1 minute time frame, we obviously had this big breaker structure to the upside. We also had trend line liquidity building up here. Price then took the liquidity from that trend line itself. And I was looking at the 15-second here. I was also noticing that we still had these equal lows built up right there. So I wasn't super keen yet. I was going to wait for those lows to get taken out. I was seeing that I had enough of a build up and enough of a confluence that price wanted to go higher that I was going to be a little bit more aggressive on this trade. So just being patient here. Okay, there we go. So not only did we create these equal lows here, but if we drag it across, we have more equal lows. So at this point in time, I was thinking, okay, well, I don't know if price is going to come all the way down here. Let me be that little bit more aggressive and try to get in this trade a little bit earlier. So then price came and took out those lows. Now we're on the 15-second time frame here. Price came and took the liquidity from those lows and then had a big push. Sorry, not yet. There we go. Now, really look here, equal lows again, right? So I was like, okay, cool. If price gives me a nice candle, a nice bullish engulfing to the upside, or at least gives me a nice push, I want to try and catch this and I want to try and get in with momentum here. So I ended up market executing on this after all that liquidity had been taken. And it did move a little bit, but honestly, it just pretty much went against me. Price failed to make a 1 minute higher high here. And that's completely fine. I did see that we had a build up, so I was confident enough that price would want to go take that out, but it just wasn't my trade, and that's completely fine. Moving on. So I'm going to jump on the 15-minute because I wasn't really too active in the next few hours. You can see that price had a big push to the downside, and it's like, okay, at this point in time, you're creating these equal lows here, or, relative equal lows sitting there. And you've also got really nice bearish range where we could look for sells, right? This whole range now becomes a selling area. You could also see that we had this trend line coming across there. Perfect. Now we can see that we have that beautiful bearish range. We can now look for a sell after price gives us a retracement, right? So just skip it through a bit. So perfect. Look at this. We marked out these relative equal lows there. We've also got an area of liquidity just sitting around here as well. So now I was seeing that price more or less was going to want to take out that liquidity internal as well. So you can see that we had this bearish breaker structure here, giving us a range from this high to this low. You can see that internally we started to make our retracement nice and slow. We then had our bearish breaker structure right there and a big push to the downside. Then we left behind this beautiful institutional area where we could look for sells. So now this was really starting to line up, and I was really interested after this break, especially with all the liquidity that was still getting left there, to look for a trade. Now, as price came into that area, I was watching the 1 minute time frame, and I noticed that we had this build up of liquidity into this POI. We didn't quite break structure. We're stepping up, higher highs, higher lows, higher high. And now we're about to get a bearish break. So after that bearish break, I was okay. Now it's time for me to get in. I set my limit with a 6 pip stop, and I was going to target that liquidity, right? That was going to be target 1. We already know that the 4 hour is so large. So really the extended target could have been, this low, all the way down here. It could have been a really, really nice trade. But again, and it was 2 trades on this day that it happened, price just didn't respect my idea. Of course, we had a reaction from the POI, which was good, but then it went higher after that. So that's a stop loss too. Next day, we catch a nice trade as well. So let's go and have a look at that. Okay, so just looking at the day before, you can see that we were targeting this liquidity here, right? And you can see that I was just stopped out before price continued to actually go and hunt that liquidity. So it ended up playing out perfectly, just wasn't my trade to take, right? That's completely fine. But now looking at price, you can see that we had this breaker structure, perfect. Now we have this structure where we have that bearish push on the hourly. So for me, I was looking to now sell to take out the hourly low, and you'll see my sell that I actually took now. Now you can see that we're quite messy. We're quite messy here, but we have this bearish range, right? So we have to consider that the true intention of the market is to go short. All this mess is just there to trick us, right? So we got to really look past it and know that sometimes when it's messy, the more details start to appear. So you'll see it in a second. We have this bearish break to the downside. We start to step up. During Asia, we create this consolidation, which is really the intention of the whole Asia session in itself. Perfect. You can also see that, which would have been a little bit confusing for some people, this internal bullish breaker structure. And because of that, I knew that, all right, well, if the Asia low gets taken out, maybe I can look for a buy. Maybe I can look to take out those highs and potentially come somewhere into here. Maybe take out this high, maybe this high, because it's all liquidity, right? Now that we have this internal break. But I was looking at this as what I really should be focused on for the day, right? That bearish structure. So there's that Asia session. Let's jump down to the 15-minute time frame and have a bit of a look. So you can see that we started creating this massive consolidation. What I noticed was we had this area of relative equal highs that were created, this area and this area, or you could say a pool of liquidity. We also had, during Asia, created a massive area of liquidity too, which did get swept. And because of that sweep, I had to always keep in mind, which was the right thing to do, that sells from here were a good trade to take, right? This point of interest here. Very good area to look for a sell. However, was it too easy? After taking that Asia high out, we had that big bearish break to the downside. There's your bearish break. I also noticed that we did come and take a lot of equal lows, a lot of liquidity was taken. So now I'm again, like I say, sometimes we'll have to look through the markets. Now again, I'm thinking, okay, cool. Well, what's this really an opportunity for? I then found this trend line that I drew. So now what's going on is we had this equal highs, price took out the liquidity from those highs, did a bearish break. A lot of traders, again, will be looking for a sell here. However, what I'm going to look for is potentially a sweep of liquidity once more. We still have relative equal highs. We still have this pool of liquidity that's just sitting there. If we go and take that out, maybe I can look for a sell and then really go and take this external low out. Perfect. So let's have a look. Let's jump down. So now we're down on the 5-minute time frame. You can see that we take out those Asia lows. And again, I was looking for a buy here. Only problem for me was that it was still before London session. So now we come into London. We do have a big push up. Again, this is 5 minutes before. Me looking at this, noticing that we had this out, that was that hourly break that I marked out to you before right here. Noticing that we had the build up during Asia session. We had a sweep of liquidity, then a break to the downside. Okay, no worries. However, we had this little internal break. After that break, I was definitely interested in looking for a buy, and I was going to be looking in this area here. I couldn't set a limit on this because it was just going to be way too big of a stop. 10 pips on GU is just way too much for me. So I was going to wait and see if price pulled back. It didn't. It then came into this POI that we spoke about and actually had a little bit of a push to the downside, potentially trying to get those early sellers to market execute or to set a limit. But again, like I explained, we had that trend line that was just creeping closer and closer. And we also had this POI where price was coming into. So for me, I was looking for price to take out the liquidity that we spoke about before. That will be doing a bullish break to the upside. So that bullish break to the upside is going to be putting a lot of traders into long positions in this bullish range. But for me, I wanted to sell and go against that because I understood where price was really looking to go. By doing this breaker structure, by taking the Asia highs and the Asia lows, it's showing us that it wants to go lower. It's just too easy at that POI. Let's wait for the liquidity to be taken first and then look for a sell. This is on the 1-minute time frame. You can see we actually react perfectly from that trend line, which we don't want to sell from there, definitely. We want to wait for the liquidity to be taken first. And there it is, right? Now we go and make that bullish break to the upside, which we see as a liquidity grab because we understand we got this whole area of liquidity. We got these relative equal highs. We've just taken trendline liquidity. We've just taken the liquidity from a POI. We've just done a bullish break, which is going to entice a lot of buyers in the bullish range. Now we want to sell, right? Now we want to sell. So now if we go down to the 15-minute time frame, what I noticed was we had this trend line building up. Again, I love my minor trend lines. I think they're awesome. So we had this trend line building up on the 15-second time frame. Now we can see And I also had this trend line building up here, 1, 2, 3. So for me, once all that liquidity had been taken, I wanted to be a little bit more aggressive on this trade. I was looking after this little internal break here, I was looking to set a limit up there, which would have made it a massive risk to reward. But I knew that we had this really minor trend line that was coming very, very close. Further to that was we actually had this trend line here, which price wanted to target. So as you can see, price sort of reacts from that trend line. This is where I was going to set my limits. This is where I was thinking, oh, should I set my limit? We've tapped on that trend line. I was like, you know what? Let me just get in this trade. Let me make sure I get in, because then that's the job done, right? Now all I have to do is manage it. So now we can see price starts to melt. Once it comes to that trend line, I'm using that as a liquidity target, melts through the trend line. And now I'm just managing that trade. Now, like I said before, this range would have been enticing a lot of buyers into the market. So that's why I was very confident in actually holding this trade. Price had a big push down, right? So at this big push down here, I was still holding full size. Now I was like, okay, I'm not going to try and think that I'm this trading god or anything like that. So I'm just going to take my partials here. And if it breaks below that, that's even better, right? So that's perfect. I ended up closing 50%. I was sitting about a 1 to 4 there. 1 to 4 on that trade, aiming for a 1 to 8.8. Price kept melting down and really did not take long. As you can see, when you really learn to see through the market, these trades become quite common. 1 to 8.7 took an hour for this trade to play out. 4.7 pip stop loss. Again, perfect analysis of looking through what price really wants to do, what the real intention of a move is. And this was a great example of that. And that's the end of my week. So that ended up being a $14,000 week, 14.9K profit, $779 in commissions. So 14.155K. Here's the results here. Thanks so much for tuning into this one. I'll see you on the next one.